So one of the most common questions that I hear when I'm coaching or mentoring case solving teams is what does a solution look like? And what I want to do in this video is talk a little bit about how do we take a good solution and turn it into a winning solution. And so in the beginning, it really comes down to setting up the stage. And that's really done through your title page where you have an engaging title. You talk about who the audience is, who they are, what their positions are, the locations, the dates, have some fun with it, and then tell them who you are. The audience knows who you are and you've engaged them. And again, one of the things with the title page, it sits up for a few seconds or minutes before you start your presentation. So it's your opportunity to start engaging with some curiosity around the title that you've placed on your presentation. And then how do you engage your audience? Quite often we do this through things like executive summaries where we talk about what the issues are. Give them a 30-foot or 30,000-foot recommendation. So a very high level idea of what the recommendation and what the impact on their business is going to be. And then once you've done that, you can start to go through and start to do the situation, complication, question, answer, setting the scene, describing the problem, asking what's going to be solved, and then relieve the tension by allowing that answer to come through. And you do that using a well-defined analysis that's specific and detailed, simple to understand, and results in a solution that's realistic, feasible, and most importantly, implementable. The components of that, what you need to deliver to your audience is the insights from the internal and external analysis, not the facts, but the insights. What's the stuff, the material that you received telling you about the organization that you're looking at. It's easily understood in terms of the decision, including how you got there. What are the criteria used? How does the organization make it happen? And how does the organization know that it's happening? Are, again, two important questions that you need to be able to answer as you move through the story that you're telling. And going beyond the answer, it's talking about a risk and mitigation strategy. The risk should show up in the analysis, the mitigation and the implementation. And just showing them, we thought about these risks. We also thought about how do you solve those risks? And we did that as we told you the solution. And then your risk and mitigation slide or the risk and mitigation strategy slide becomes more of a summary of what you've talked about. You can also look at, you asked, we answered. Along the way, we've answered your questions. These are the questions you asked, and these are the answers we're giving you. And then at the end, talk a little bit about the future and beyond. Again, in a lot of cases, in a case-solving competition, you're setting yourself up as a consultant. This future and beyond is how you get that next job and add some more realism to what you're doing in the competition setting. Closing the sale. You want to show that you've delivered value. You want to close with high energy. The idea that you're exuding confidence, you've thought about the impacts, and you're talking about the value proposition. Often people end up ending on things like, now we open the floor to questions. I would recommend stopping before you get there. Often, especially in the competition environment, those questions are going to come anyways. And in the real environment, those questions have already come because people have interrupted you in your presentation to ask those questions. So really end on what is the value that this solution is delivering, and do that with high energy. And if you're doing that, thank your audience for listening as you're going along. And then the other piece of this is just building a little bit of how do you build that well-defined solution? And you start off with defining it, defining the context, and going back and forth between a few of the things. But once you've defined it, you can deliberate. So that's where the research, that's where you draw from your research, the facts, the literature, etc. You start the design and create an informed and practical information that's suited for it. At a case competition, this is generally where it ends. In real life, you go on to deploy that, you implement the ideas efficiently, validate them, and then there's a debrief where you can look back and see what happens. Often in the deploy section, you may also have to step back. You also may have to step back during design and deliberate a little bit more in order to figure out what's actually going on. So what does a winning solution look like on a case competition? And even in the real world, it checks off the scorecard. Sometimes you know what that is. Sometimes you're not aware of what that is, but there is always a scorecard. There's something that you're being checked off against. So make sure you're checking that off. You provided qualitative and quantitative support for the solution. As you're presenting it, you seem seen as comfortable with the issues. And I think most importantly, you're likable, you're confident, you're consistent. And in a lot of cases, especially at global or international case competitions, the teams are really, really good. And likability is one of those factors, one of those small factors, but a large factor that may separate you from winning the competition to losing the competition.